Hello, this is a short video on structure and why it's so useful to support challenging behaviour and why it's so important to us in our lives and for our children, our pupils at Castle School. Okay, so the first thing we need to realise is that we all have a need for structure. It helps us to know who and where we are, and if we were to have all our structures removed, we would be in a very dark place, lost, not knowing where to go, what to do. Our anxiety levels would be extremely high, and we would probably behave in a way that we would not normally do so. So structure is a really key reassurance to us all in our lives. And we all need to know where we are in this world, in this life, in terms of time, in terms of space, in terms of how we relate to the people around us, and also how we relate to our belongings, where our important objects are. So we all use lots of structures, and I'm just going to quickly give you an idea of some of the structures that we commonly use to try to get across how important and how integral to all our lives structure is. So for structures that help us to understand time, we have, of course, alarm clocks that get us up in the morning, clocks that guide us through our day, tell us whether we need to hurry up or whether we've got time to spare. We've got clocks in the car wherever we go, clocks on our phones. We have our days structured according to different times, even down to what television programs we want to see, what days we are. We have lots of structures that help us understand where we are in time. Structures to help us understand where we are in place. We have maps, we have signs and numbers and names of streets, and we all have mental maps inside our heads that once we've absorbed those external structures, we can start to have an idea of where we are in relation to our home, our work, our friends and our shops and so on. We make sure that we name each place so we can differentiate it. So every town, village, city, country has a different name. We divide spaces to make them clear where one space ends and another space starts. So fencing and other things, railings, all help us structure our sense of place. We have areas that we know we're not allowed to go to. We get directed around whether we like it or not. We get told how to go in and come out of buildings, which land we can have some claim to and which spaces we can't go to. So structures for place are all around us every moment of the day. As for relating to other people, the other people around us, we have a piece of paper that tells us that we exist, our birth certificate. On our phone are all kinds of structures, diaries, lists of friends, friends' birthdays that guide us on how to relate to other people. We have diaries that allow us to plan to meet others. We have family trees that tell us who our families are. We have newspapers that tell us what everyone else is doing in the world, so we exist not just in a vacuum, but in a political and social, economic, cultural world. And we unfortunately have lots of contracts in our lives that govern how we are going to relate to other people in terms of our jobs, houses we buy, and lots of other arrangements. We have a massive online social structure that we buy into often. We have workplace etiquette that tells us how to dress, how to behave. What's appropriate at home might not be appropriate in the workplace, and vice versa. And we have magazines that tell us how other people are dressing, how other people are behaving, so that we can either choose to follow them or not. So we've got lots of structures for relating to other people. Oh, we have events calendars as well, so things that happen throughout the year that structure our lives, such as holidays, Christmas, sporting events, and so on. Then we have structures for relating to things. We have bookcases and shelving and cupboards in order that we can locate the items that we want when we want them. We organize things. So for example, in this cutlery drawer, if it were my drawer, I would make sure it was knife, fork, spoon. I wouldn't like it any other way, but that's just how I am. We have recipes for telling us how to manipulate objects to get what we want in terms of cooked food. We have favorite items that we don't like to share with others. We have instructions for social activities, for constructing things. And on top of all of that, we use habits and routines in the way that we speak, the way that we make friends, the way that we shop, the way that we cook, the way that we visit places, the way that we organize and plan and travel. We know that there are certain structures to follow for all of these things. So for example, eating, if you were going to go into a restaurant, you might be familiar with the idea of standing and waiting until you're given a table. Then you'd be familiar with the idea that you look at the menu and wait for someone to come and take your order. So we have all of these structures to help us to get along with each other and to help us through the day. So we have to imagine that some children do not always access these supports, and just how scary a world it would be if you just didn't know what to do, where you were, who you are, who the other people are. And it's difficult to appreciate that because we have been so reliant on our own structures that we take them for granted and often don't realize what it would be like not to have them. So some children have a problem with routine in that just because something happened one day, it doesn't mean to say that it's going to happen the next day. So I've worked with children, for example, who every time they came to school needed reassurance that they were actually going to go home at the end of the day. And just because they had yesterday it didn't mean in their heads that it was a given that they were going to go home at the end of that particular day. So they needed some kind of visual support to remind them where that's going, where they're going to go. So they need support to understand where they are, where they get back home, what they're meant to be doing when they're in a certain place, how do they act around certain people, how will those people act with the child themselves, what belongs to them, what belongs to others, and where stuff is. And of course, the problem with all of this is that the less you are connected to the concepts of space and time, the more difficult places like school become, not just because it's difficult to understand what room you're meant to be in at a certain time and what people are going to do at certain times, but actually the school subjects become more difficult because just about every school subject is underpinned by time and place. It's the basis for geography, obviously place, but also mathematics, English, and relating to others and structuring your relationship to others is difficult. If that's difficult to you, then you're going to struggle with reading or planning a design project to be used by other people. The whole of school becomes much more difficult. the whole of life becomes much more difficult, and therefore we get an increase in anxiety, and an increase in anxiety can often lead to challenging behaviour. So we relieve children's anxiety by giving them lots of structure that ties them in and gives them a sense of reassurance. So the more structure that you can provide, the better. But here are some of the common ones. We have structures that help with a sense of time, that locate children within a certain time. We have structures that tell them where they should be at what time and what they should be doing. And these very simple things can just make all the difference between a happy and relaxed and engaged child or an anxious and a child that's finding it very difficult to go along with the day's routine. So there we are. A happy child is what we're aiming for. Thank you for listening. This video goes hand in hand with a video that I've recently produced on visual structures. So you may like visual supports. So you may like to check that one out if you haven't done already. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.